Hello, and welcome to this episode of Dead Air Live. I'm Joe Lynch, and I'll be your host tonight. Don't adjust your set. This is not Greater Somerville. My guest is Alicia Harris, a foodie extraordinaire, personal chef, health and wellness coach, and frequent guest lecturer on the all good things food circuit. It is my pleasure to welcome her to the SCATV studios and to Dead Air Live. Tonight, in addition to chatting about veggies, spices, herbs, mushrooms, shopping, personal chefs and caterers, the locavore movement, pesticides, allergies, dieting, and cooking in general, Alicia will introduce me, and I suspect some of our viewers, to the secret world of umami. She is a Texas native, has taught at the Massachusetts College of Art and the Cambridge Center for Adult Education. She is a frequent writer for online publications dedicated to sustainability and gastronomy. Folks, Dead Air Live presents to you the founder of Lucy's Mom Cuisine and Tessa's Table 2050, Alicia Harris. Welcome to Dead Air Live.
Very good to be here. Thank you.
We finished up noshing just about 48 hours ago. At a wonderful Davis Square eatery, and we got to meet each other for the first time. I'm excited to talk about food.
Yes.
You talk about food all the time.
No, I spend most of my time making food. This is a rare treat.
We're going to have a blast tonight. I tried to convince you early on that it would have been great for you and I just to sit at a table and be filmed eating. Don't you think that would have been a fun show?
That wouldn't have made us more articulate, but perhaps more sincere.
And it would have made people's mouths water at home.
Oh, yes.
Sure. So we're going to do a little chatting tonight. And the chatting is going to be mainly centered on, first, you. And then we're going to chat a little bit about food, where it comes from, the best foods to put into your body, maybe some of the worst foods. We'll leave the brand names out, but we'll talk about the worst foods that you can put into your body. We're going to talk about your experiences, maybe with personal chefing, catering, what's the difference. So first I want to ask you a question. Lucy's Mom Cuisine, where does it come from?
If you have a name like Alicia, you need a different business name. Lucy was my dog, and everybody could pronounce it, and besides, she had a following.
Lucy had a following?
Lucy had a following.
And her following was?
Well, it was in Cambridge.
Got it. So you started that, and now the current name of your company is?
It's still Lucy's Mom.
And then the secondary?
And Tessa's Table is a group I organized to investigate progressive gastronomy. We're aiming towards a really right-sized diet for everybody in the year 2050. We want to rough out those parameters so that people can eat sustainably and very well, and make it a form of gastronomy, not make it a form of, oh gosh, I have to wear earth shoes.
So let's talk a little bit. How does a young gal from Texas wind up in Cambridge? You have a lot in between. I did read your bio.
Yes.
So you kind of left Texas and then traveled. I see a lot of international travel in there, some teaching, some painting.
Yes, that was my first
away.
career.
Yep.
And I lived in California mainly for my education and then for the next 20 years. And I always loved New England, and I never got to live here, so it seemed like a natural thing to do. And it was just a brilliant move. I've been very happy with it. It's great.
The early years were spent painting, though, more in the art world than in the...
Yes, but the other thing I always did was cook, and I traveled a lot in those days. I would always ask the chef where he learned to do this. No matter how humble or how grand the restaurant, I would just ask. Many of the chefs in Italy at little corner restaurants would say, I learned this from my grandmother. And I would say, oh, can you take me to her? I'll chop onions, I'll scrub her floors, I just want to watch. He said, I think that could be arranged. Now, I don't know if that would work today, but I got inside a lot of really fantastic Italian home cooking setups where I was able to observe the woman in the family who'd made everybody's lunch and dinner for 50 years, how she did it. And that was a priceless education. It really made the difference between having a very high standard and just reading a recipe.
Now, do you think some of these chefs that you met in the early years, in Italy or France, or do you think they all kind of learned the basics of eating from their moms or from observing their moms and their families eat?
I think that it's going to be the grandmother who does most of the cooking. Italians don't live like Americans do. It's not unusual to have a 4-generation house. So the mother is going to do the trench warfare of raising a family. The grandmother is going to spend the day in the kitchen. And that's why the idiom in Italy for home cooking is cucina di nonna, grandmother cuisine. And that's the best person to learn from because her memory goes way, way back, and she's not interested in modern conveniences. That takes away from her importance. And that was just fantastic. I recommend anybody try to learn something that way.
We also have to remember the time frame. I mean, I assume you were traveling in the 80s?
Yeah, the late 70s and the 80s. I was spending a great deal of time in Italy and France. And it was easier then. It was the dollar was stronger against their currency. I think people now could have a vacation in India that would resemble maybe some of my traveling in France and Italy, and maybe they could learn the same things there.
Okay, we're going to have to stop talking about French and Italian food because
Yeah.
my mouth is starting to water already talking about
I'm
it.
conditioned that way too.
Right. I think most humans are. Smell, taste, sound, it all goes along with cooking. So let's start talking about some of the basics that you try to impart when you do your guest right, or when you are out there talking about gastronomy and you're talking about the senses and you're talking about spices and foods and what's good, what's bad. Let's chat a little bit about one thing that you and I talked about this past noshing session that we had was the freshness of food. How fresh is fresh when we, the average American, are shopping in the supermarket? Let's just kind of start at that point.
Well, one reason that fresh in the supermarket is probably not really fresh is that unless it's local, it may have traveled in a truck across the country to you and have been in cold storage for weeks or months before that. It's not uncommon to get an apple from the state of Washington that's been in cold storage for 6 months. And yet, when you see it in the supermarket, it looks fine.
They look beautiful.
Sure they do.
Sure.
And they have kind of a disappointing taste, but they look fine. They don't look like the wrong thing to eat. So one of our best defenses about making sure that we have fresh food is to know that it's local and to know that it's seasonal. It hasn't been in somebody's cold storage for half the year.
Or in a container ship coming across the ocean. Right.
Yeah, that is, if you will eat seasonally and shop locally and be troubled to know the farmer if you can, that will be your best guarantee of getting food that has the maximum nutrients in it.
So we're going to delve a little bit more into that in terms of the locavore, the whole movement that started up with shop local, eat local. But let's go into a little bit about a phrase that you use, which is shopping is cooking. So I don't know if are we going to be ready for the clip at some point? What do you think? You want to?
Sure.
Sure. Let's go into the clip, and we're going to talk a little bit about that phrase from Alice Waters.
Well, she said it. It's a brilliant observation. You can't cook well unless you have shopped well. And if you have to choose between cooking and shopping, choose shopping, because it'll all work itself out somehow. And that's, I bear that in mind every day of my life, because I'm in the position of choosing the right food for all these people. And if I can't shop right, I'm defeated before I start.
And your mantra is shopping like a personal chef.
Yes.
Want to go to the clip?
Sure.
Let's do it.
There's a way to be a good shopper and a way to be a less than shopper. Well, this is my favorite store. I trust them. And that's the thing to look for wherever you shop, to know who's buying the produce and to know about whether they're truthful in labeling it. One thing that I'd like to put people onto is reading stickers. Here's some gorgeous thin-skinned bell peppers. and it's really important for them to be organic if you can. But how do you know that they're really, really organic? You would look for a sticker. The sequence on the sticker begins with 9 for organic produce. It begins with 4 for conventional produce. It begins with 6 for GMO produce, and we won't find any of that here. So this is just an extra way of finding out and making sure, although everything here is very clearly labeled. There's a whole category of fruit and vegetables that really should be organic. The top 50 vegetables and fruits that we in this country consume. We just buy them when we go to the grocery store. And then the next 50 are a little bit more exotic, but the top 50 have, in this list, which we're going to link you to, the top 10 of those 50 are imperative to buy organic. They include celery, bell peppers, peaches, things that have really thin skins. If they're not organic, what will happen is that a very thin-skinned fruit will just absorb a lot of pesticides, and you'll never be able to get rid of them no matter how much you scrub them. So you need to start with an organic thin-skinned fruit. Now if we look at bananas, bananas don't have to be organic. Those are incredibly well protected. Conceivably, it's a waste of your money to buy an organic banana. The same thing for avocados. They're very well protected. You don't have to pay that extra $1 to buy an organic avocado. I suggest committing this list to memory or printing it out of your computer and just going everywhere with it, and you'll know a lot just from slowly going by it. Down at the bottom of the list is the list of 10 fruits and vegetables that don't really have to be organic. The middle 30 in descending order of importance, whether they're organic. Get used to going out with this list and learn it, and your shopping and your decisions about what to pay for and how much will all come together a lot better. You'll see where you can save some money and see where it's not a smart idea to. Now, when you're looking at potatoes, those are thin-skinned. Those need to be organic if at all possible. Broccoli is also right out there, willing to receive a pesticide, and you want to be sure that your broccoli is rinsable and as pure as you can get it when you eat it. The list makes perfect intuitive sense. You can begin to get a feeling for which vegetables are too thin-skinned to bear up under all that pesticide and which are not. And this is a wonderful small laboratory for looking at all the right things. You can buy citrus fruit that is not organic. It's going to be fine. You can buy sweet potatoes that are organic. Those are much better if you get them organic. Once you start working as a personal chef, you're on a big learning curve. You should know a lot already, but you're going to learn more and more and more. Now, a good part of my clientele has severe food allergies and intolerances. The last thing they need in the mix is chemicals that will never wash off. And I worked in this business a long time before I knew that rinsing your vegetables carefully was not enough. So you gather the knowledge you need as you go through life and as you go through your work. Perhaps 15 years ago, nobody asked me to do organic. Lately, that's all they want, and that's all they should be eating. This papaya is innocent and beautiful, but papayas are among the most common genetically manipulated organisms there are in a grocery store. Pineapples, it's not that important because you cut most of a very heavy outer layer off, and the inner layer is just fine. The pesticides haven't gotten that far. But this was a big revelation to me within the last 5 years that there was simply no way to rinse non-organic foods clean. They had to have natural resistance to pesticides in the form of very thick skins. So as you go through the store, shop that way. Spend a little more money on thin-skinned things, a little less on thick-skinned things, and that's just a very good metric for making the best use of your time and money.
So we're back in the vegetables section. I have to admit, I'm going to make my confession right here on air. I had to get rid of my personal chefs. So I've got to learn how to shop like a personal chef.
Oh, great.
But I did wear my chef's pants
Yes,
for
you did.
Tonight. I know. It's driving the camera people crazy, but that's all right. Love the clip, but let's go a little bit deeper. When you start talking about shopping like a personal chef, do you think most people do that? I'm going to ask you a couple of strange questions. Do you think most people shop today like a personal chef who's going to be preparing a sumptuous meal for their family? Or do they shop based on price?
They shop based on convenience and based on a vague idea of what everybody likes, but that may not include planning. And the only way you can save money at the grocery store at this point is to plan very carefully. Not buy something because you might eat it, but buy it because you've planned to eat it and you know when. If you do that, that's thing one. You can have a much higher quality of food if you are willing to make a list, and if you're willing to stick with that list and honor those commitments you made on paper throughout the week. And I think that's a hard thing for people, because I think visualizing what they're going to want and what they're probably going to eat is a very tough task. If I interview a new client, often they can't name more than a couple of vegetables that they like. They just draw a blank. I think it's that hard to sit down and plan. So this may be something that you want to read a little bit about how to do, how to plan your week, how to buy fruit and vegetables so they will be fresh when you need them, how to use the freezer intelligently if you need to.
And don't overbuy.
Yeah, don't. If you just think you want it, don't buy it. Buy it if you know you're going to use it.
But if you plan to serve it within the next 3 to 4 days or 2 to 3 days, you buy it, use it, and that's it.
Well, food before it's cooked has different kinds of lives in the refrigerator. Some things are very good keepers. Other things you really should have them within a couple of days. And once you've cooked food, it goes on a journey. It becomes less and less nutritive after about day 3. So if you're going to keep something that you've cooked for longer than 3 days in the icebox, freeze it and label it.
Or, Elisha, even in an Irish household where my late mom used to, as they say, boil the bedevil out of vegetables, you're losing nutrients. The longer that sits in the boiling water, you're losing the nutrients out of it.
Yes, if you can learn not to overcook, that's a wonderful way to get the full benefit of what you've had to pay so much for. The price of food has gone up tremendously since I started in this business about 20 years ago. Going shopping can be staggering, and having a battle plan is a marvelous defense against it. Knowing that you're going to steam that broccoli that night is very helpful to know. You don't wonder any longer. You know what you're going to do.
So let's talk a little bit about how our food chain is treated. You and I had a great chat the other night about the agricultural industry in this country and its use of pesticides and what that does to our food. Pesticides are needed in certain instances, especially when it comes to, the Deep South, where there are more insects and more types of diseases that can get into the food chain. But you take it away and start talking about a little bit about the pesticides, allergies that can be created from the use of pesticides, and then a little bit about the environmental working group, and we're going to see a clip about that a little later. So you take it away.
Pesticides are everywhere. Our environment is full of them. Even just if we walk past a lawn that's been freshly sprayed with pesticides so that it'll stay green. So we need to avoid them where we can. The research that's coming up is very compelling about there being a distinct relationship between pesticides and allergies, especially in children who are uniquely vulnerable to allergies. Not that we can't get them at our age. We can. There are plenty of people who at midlife wake up to find that they can't do dairy anymore, that they'll go to the hospital if they do.
Let me ask you the question. Are they the younger, are they uniquely more susceptible to the allergies caused by pesticides because their immune systems have not been fully developed? Or is there something about the pesticides that we're now using that causes those allergies?
Many people make the argument that an allergy is really an environmental illness. A food allergy is an environmental illness. And that the children especially are the canaries in the mine shaft. It doesn't mean leave us adults out. We get sick with allergies all the time. But children are far more vulnerable to the neurotoxicity of pesticides. to all the diseases with which they are associated. There are about 7 major diseases that have a strong association with pesticides. And an association is quite different than saying the pesticide is the cause. It's to say that there's a cluster of factors which goes into this illness gaining headway, and pesticides are among them.
But you can make that link. You can make a link.
Yes, yes. If anybody is,
we were talking about, as an example, we were talking about the rapid rise in peanut allergies, mostly in kids that you see now, where school sports and school lunches and school kids are told which of their classmates have allergies like that, because some of them can be extremely dangerous.
Well, protein molecules can travel by air. And this is why in a lot of schools, you can't make your kid a peanut butter sandwich anymore.
Right.
Because once he opens the bag, affected children can be 10 feet away and still feel it. So this is, it's getting to be a serious problem. The government doesn't even really have terribly accurate figures later than 2004 for how many children are falling ill of these allergies, but it is pandemic, and it's grave. And one of the defenses against bringing this on, against just courting it, saying, yes, give me this, is to be sure that while you don't control the whole environment, you do control how much pesticides are on your food, what you're willing to take in that way. I think I had my before and after day with reference to this very subject, pesticides on food, came when I fully understood that you can't wash them off. You can rinse food for grit and for dirt and for sand and for all kinds of pathogens, but not for pesticides. If it's touched a vulnerable food, it's in there. It's very
into
deep
the
down.
very fiber of the fruit or vegetable.
All it has
itself.
to be is thin-skinned enough.
Let's go into the clip about pesticides, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit more about it. We ready for that clip?
Well, pesticides are associated with many ills. The first of them is that you're putting toxins into your system on purpose with every bite you eat. That can affect you. It can be a hormone disruptor, meaning your master gland will not work right. Many other kinds of hormones can be disrupted. It can affect fertility. It can affect well-being. It's going to be very, very inflammatory. Anytime you put a toxin in your body, there will be inflammation. Inflammation opens the gateway to all kinds of diseases, to arthritis, to cancer. You want to eat non-inflammatory foods. If possible, you want to eat foods with a lot of color, like a papaya, this gorgeous color, berries that are just that gorgeous range of purple to blue to bright red. If it's got a lot of color, it's good for you. But if it's organic and it's got a lot of color, it's really good for you because you're missing out on the pesticides.
Cultural industry in this country and its use of pesticides. Is there really a way of escaping it when you talk about mass production of food?
Well, there's a strategy that you can use that will keep the most vulnerable foods to pesticides off your plate, or else you buy them organic. One reason that I love the Environmental Working Group and their fantastic lists they publish every year of the top vulnerable to pesticide vegetables and fruits that all Americans buy, and then all the way down to the bottom where it really doesn't make such a big difference whether you're buying organic or not. But this is a wonderful money-saving tool. If you're thinking it might be time to start going organic at your house, you want to be selective and to buy organic where you can afford to and where it's most important. And that means knowing what doesn't have to be organic. Delightfully, an avocado doesn't have to be organic. It's very thick-skinned. Ditto a banana. So I would say start with that list and look at that. It's 50 things that nearly every American household has in them. And the top 10 are the ones to concentrate on, like celery. We use celery all the time for all kinds of things. But If you can't buy it organic, it's going to be filled with pesticides, and it's going to be very vulnerable to that.
And as you said earlier, Alicia, start buying selectively. You don't have to buy, just because the celery is two for $3, you don't have to buy both packages. Look at the pricing, it's $3. Look at the organic, it may be $2.99 for the one package, but there's no waste, and there's no pesticides. Good point, good point. We're going to get off that downside of pesticides.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit of a downer, but we're going to talk about spices. I love spices. There are certain spices that I can eat, certain spices I have to stay away from. But we're going to talk about spices and herbs, and you're going to introduce me to alkaline acid spectrum. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. You take it away, and then I'll tell you what my favorite herbs are.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
In my business, we read a lot about future trends in how to keep well and eat well. One of them that I would have thought it would have taken off years ago is being mindful of the acid-alkaline spectrum. Anything you eat is somewhere on that spectrum. It's either very acid or very alkaline or something a little bit less than. If we are eating with this in mind, only about 30% of our food will come from the acid end of the spectrum. That means meat, baked goods, anything to drink, very well-aged cheeses, pasta. All of this should not be more than about 30% of what you eat that day. And then at the other end, the alkaline end, is melons and limes and different kind of grain like quinoa rather than a grain like wheat. All fruits, nearly all vegetables, all spices except curry powder, nearly all herbs. And if you'll start there and selectively include the other stuff, you're going to have the foundation of a really, really healthy diet. And it's going to leave in your system every time that we eat something, we're creating ourselves. It doesn't all turn into fat. Some of it turns into muscle and bone and nerve tissue. And the ash that we speak of in the food world is what is left of a food in our system. If we leave an alkaline ash, then we are bearing up joint health and bone health. We are defending against cancer. We are defending against any disease to which inflammation in the body is a gateway. That's why it's important to remember.
Inflammation of the body. I'm so glad we're going to talk about this again.
We're going to mention it in
because
passing.
No, we're going
Yeah.
to talk about it because we brought it up. I brought it up on Sunday. You know, as people age, arthritis and stiffness, and not that that's happening to me at this point, but
God.
your shoulders and your knees and your ankles are some of the first places where you start to feel that uncomfortable feeling of inflammation. People think it's actually the bones rubbing together, but it's a result, from what I'm reading, of inflammation of those joints. And it can lead to arthritis, it leads to a lot of other things. Is that part of the aging process, and what can we do to counteract that with our food?
Well, it's part and parcel of aging naturally, but that doesn't mean it's acceptable. It means that if there's a way to fight it, you can. We can fight inflammation with herbs, with spices, with alkalizing our diet. We don't have to just say, oh, okay, now that I'm more than 45, I'll accept this. We need to bear in mind that we have a long life expectancy, and the last 20 or 30 years of it shouldn't be lived in pain.
Well, I'm kicking and screaming all the way into that era, but we're going to go to another clip, and we're going to talk the clip is going to talk about herbs and alkalizing. We ready for that one?
Herbs are extremely alkalizing. I'm glad you asked about that. Alkalizing to your system means building up your natural defenses against arthritis, against cancer, against many, 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 many diseases that you really don't want, and you can drive them away by eating them. If they have antioxidants, that's great. But when we think of our bodies, everything that we eat, everything that we take in at all, is a little bit acid, or it's a little bit alkaline, or it's very alkaline and very acid. And pretend this is the the field of positive and negative numbers in math, they converge towards zero. So there's nothing that you can eat that's a little bit alkaline and a little bit acid. What the acid that we take in does is to create an ash in our system that tears down our natural ability to fight off just exactly those diseases we don't want. If our system is alkalized through a lot of herbs, most spices too, really dedicate yourselves to herbs and spices. That's a big alkalizing step to take. People who are looking at these things right now, and it's a kind of vanguard approach to what to eat and why to eat it, they are recommending that alkaline foods take up about 70% of your diet, and acid-bringing foods take up about 30% of it. So, to be simple, the alkalizing foods are plants, fruits, vegetables. The feast foods are, the acid-producing foods are grains, meat, alcohol, cheese. So, as a daily thing, you want to lighten up on those foods. Don't eliminate them, just make sure that they're not more than 30% of your diet on a given day. More alkalinity in your diet. Yes, naturally dark green vegetables, fruits like melons, even citrus fruit. A lime is a very alkalizing thing. It's kind of paradoxical. You think that's citric acid, but it's not. It's the ash that it leaves in your body that counts. So if you would switch out the most alkalizing fruits for the least alkalizing, you'd be winning already. If you would use lentils instead of animal protein, you'd be getting a 100% protein hit. You would not be missing out. And you would be eliminating a lot of acidifying of your system.
First question is Alka-Seltzer.
Oh, that's very acid.
We're talking about Alka-Seltzer. And what is that intended to do?
It's intended to correct the amount of acid in your stomach. And it will for a while. You'd probably be better off eating a slice of melon.
Or staying away from very acidic foods.
It could have, yes.
There is a revelation, though, isn't it? You know, I'm starting to feel guilty. We had talked when we first met about the types of foods that we as Americans put into our body. And I'm starting to feel totally guilty, even halfway during the show here. So let's talk a little bit about internationalizing the diet that we have. We Americans are so used to convenience, fresh, fast food, whip it off the shelf, put it in the microwave, and off you go. So let's talk a little bit about the internationalizing of your diet.
When people want to improve their diet, they may know that the standard American diet, SAD for short, is meat heavy, it's dairy heavy, it's starch heavy. They know that they've heard that that's not quite the thing. But it's very difficult to just switch out portions on your plate. So you're eating 3 ounces of meat, which is about as much as you should have at a sitting, and lots and lots and lots of vegetables. It doesn't look like dinner anymore. One way you can fight that perception is by looking at the foodways of many other countries than ourselves. We're the only country that's in this kind of trouble. We are the wealthiest and the biggest, and we eat the worst. And
obesity in this country is an epidemic.
Yes, especially among children. Mm-hmm. But that may be tied in with pesticides. There is something about the relationship between pesticides and obesity that really bears looking into. So this is how to get your kids to eat right, how to make your own table charming to yourself as opposed to hateful because you've taken yourself in hand. You're going to make a commitment to doing better. The first place to look is at other cultures who, despite not having the financial resources we do, they eat better than we do. My favorite is the Mediterranean diet, which is so big on vegetables that you really almost don't notice it also contains meat. You don't have to be a total vegetarian to do the Mediterranean diet. looking at the diets of the Middle East. That's beautiful food. You don't see much meat. You see whole grains, you see gorgeous vegetables.
And meat almost takes a back seat to the amount of vegetables and grains that you have on a plate.
You can also do what they do in the American South. It's called meat and three. Here in New England, we tend to eat meat and 2 vegetables, and that's dinner. But if you had meat and 3 vegetables, that would be less meat and more vegetables, and that's a very good way to start. Just don't take all the stuff you might not want to be eating anymore off immediately. You'll destroy your family. They'll hate you. But just start manipulating things a little bit to make them healthier and more interesting. If I've taken meat away from you, as I have from people, they hire me to do these things to them, then I shouldn't give you back the same dinner with less meat. I should give you something that has a whole different frame of reference and that you might enjoy a very great deal without missing what is totally familiar.
So one of those spices that I know we have a clip about is turmeric.
Turmeric, yes.
Turmeric.
Well,
turmeric.
This is one.
Alicia, that's probably one of the spices that is so far in the back of my spice cupboard that I can't pronounce it, number one, so I never use it. But we're going to go to a clip on it.
Yeah, let's do it.
How's that?
Well, everybody should get as much turmeric as they can. I'm glad you asked about it. It's getting to be a really important and delicious weapon. I sometimes feel like I'm putting my clients on a South Asian diet just to give them more. But one thing you can do if a curry is not for you, if that whole part of the world does not have cooking that charms you, with as little as a half a teaspoon of turmeric a day in something, in a green drink, in a soup that you've made, just something, you can have all the best protection there is. I get mine in green drinks. I make a green drink by putting a banana with a few leaves of kale, with a few grapes, with some fresh ginger, and a half teaspoon of turmeric. It's delicious. If you want to throw in a few kumquats, do that. You will have had your MDR of turmeric, which will help you fight all kinds of painful complaints, reduce arthritis symptoms. It will reduce your potential for developing cancer. It's a phenomenal anti-inflammatory. It's cheap and it's easy.
When I go into my favorite market, almost every market that you go into today has the organic section, has the natural food section, has the healthy section. Whether it's Stop and Shop or Whole Foods or Market Basket or Trader Joe's, everybody's got that. You're going to teach me about shopping for anything but meats. Mm-hmm. How's that? So
great.
Teach me how to do that when I go into the supermarket.
Well, the first thing to consider is that meat, chicken, fish, all these things have something wonderful in common. They have a magnificent, satisfying taste. This is why people have so much trouble just saying no to as much of it as they've been eating. They want that taste. It's a taste called umami. It's been spoken of since about the late 1800s, but it's only just been put on the real map, the map of tastes that we know, that we recognize: sweet, sour, bitter, salty. Well, put umami in there, because a part of your tongue is dedicated to detecting that. And that is the taste. It's a Japanese word for yummy. It means that which is deeply satisfying, that lets you know you've eaten something that's really good and that you can stop now because you've had it. It's been satisfying. So how do we get that with less meat? We add in mushrooms. That's a very good thing to do. They have a splendid umami taste. I'm not a great fan of meat substitutes. I'm a fan of recombining things so that they taste good even with less meat, not necessarily throwing in a whole bunch of tofu, which, unless it's organic, is going to be genetically manipulated. So you want to be careful about that.
So do you think I'm having an umami moment the first fried clam I taste from Kelly's?
Oh, yes, that's definitely, you've been waiting for that all week.
Or from the clam box up at Kennebunkport Bridge. I mean, those are my two umami moments. The first fried clam of the season. I'm teasing you. I'm
No, but
talking
it's-
about, but that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
that instantaneous gratification of that taste.
We know that just as surely as we know when we've eaten something very salty. It's only recently had a word that has come into usage. If we know to, if I tell you you have the taste buds to detect it, and then you start noticing, oh, that's what that was. That was yummy. That is umami. You'll soon get a feel for it.
So you touched on the mushrooms. We're going to start talking about mushrooms in a very short clip. How's that? Let's go to that clip.
Oh, well, this is a wonderful source of mushrooms. Shop for your mushrooms here. These are Japanese mushrooms, maitakes and shiitakes, and they are organic and they are gorgeous. There's almost nothing you can do that's as alkalizing as to eat a mushroom. Put it in a salad, roast it, do anything with it. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but it's a phenomenal thing to do for yourself. And this is a marvelous place to buy them. These are beach mushrooms. These are trumpets. These are maitakes, which are kind of related to shiitakes. And then here are shiitakes, organic shiitakes, which are simply gorgeous. And the old standby, the cremini mushroom, which is the most flavorful mushroom to cook with if you are doing Western cooking.
Now, what about portobellas?
Oh, they're marvelous. I think we have, well, we don't have a very big one today. Sometimes we have enormous portobello mushrooms here, the size of a butter plate. One very friendly thing to do for yourself is to simply buy a portobello mushroom, braise it with a little bit of vegetable stock and some garlic, and eat that. It will be perfect. It will be enough. It'll be like having a steak for dinner.
Joe Lynch's favorite mushroom is portobello, hands down. There is nothing like being on my neighbor's deck in the June, July timeframe when it's a beautiful evening and those portobellos are being grilled softly.
Oh.
My mouth is watering again, thank you very much. A little, very, very good olive oil, a little sea salt, a little pepper. That's it. And
That's all you need.
We make a meal of that portobello. The chicken becomes secondary. So is there a difference in the seasonal types of things that we eat? I mean, we tend to eat heavy soups, we tend to eat hot foods in the winter, cooler foods in the summer. Talk a little bit about that because we're going to get a little leeway in what we talk about here. So I wanted to kind of talk about the different, when you say shop seasonally, talk about winter versus summer diets.
Well, a winter diet is not as varied as a summer diet. That's our growth season in Massachusetts. We have about 20 weeks of gorgeous produce, and the rest of it is kale and root vegetables. So we have to be very inventive with those things. In countries where the weather is really cold in the winter, Lithuania, Russia, they have they don't use many spices in their cooking because spices actually will cool you off. That's why in India and Mexico, food is very piquant. Hot as in piquant, not hot as in temperature, because those will lower your body temperature. And if it's 117 outside, you may need the advantage. And foods that are not seasoned very highly will help you conserve body heat. So that's one thing to think of in winter when I'm kind of off the clock here because what I want in winter is Jamaican food. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily want more potato soup or more root vegetables. But if you do kind of live with the seasons, there's some marvelous restaurants in this area that, though they cost the earth to go to, they will not give you anything out of season. They just won't. And we can shop for beautiful winter produce at the Arsenal in Somerville now. Mm-hmm. That's the winter market. You never have to feel left out or left behind.
It always amazes me the amount of crowds that are at that armory during the winter season. And our summer markets in Davis Square and Union Square, they also have the produce markets.
Well, think of it this way. If you buy berries year-round from Chile and Australia and all the places that, if you were willing to buy their berries, they could keep you in blueberries and raspberries all winter long. You would completely lose the sense of the wonderful surprise, the real glamour and the sweetness of what it is to have these things from our own backyard in season. The season is very short, but the awareness you develop of what a great joy it is and what a gift of the earth it is
Sure.
enhanced by just, have less than you want, not more than you want.
Yeah, there is hands down, there's nothing like having a tomato that's been grown right in somebody's backyard. I mean, we all grew up when, many of the old timers had their own vegetable gardens, et cetera, but one of the things I wanted to touch on is something you were talking about previous, and it was the pesticide issue. And you were talking about eating the thin-skinned fruits and vegetables versus the thicker skin. The one thing I wanted to ask you is the local movement, or the movements that are across the United States now, is to grow local. A lot of people have their own vegetable gardens in their yards. In Somerville, unfortunately, we don't quite know what the use of the land was many times prior to the homes being built on it.
Yes.
So in the raised vegetable garden world, raised beds, what's the easiest one to grow for me, May to September?
You could grow an enormous amount of herbs and really save yourself a lot of money. Basil grows beautifully all summer here.
Love basil.
Parsley grows beautifully. Mint grows like a weed. It's fantastic. You can grow your own herbs in containers and just have enough to give away. Tomatoes grow beautifully all summer here. Berries do. There are many things. If you don't have more than 4 by 5 feet in a sunny patch of your property, you can make a little garden there and keep yourself in tomatoes and basil and berries all summer.
I tried it a couple of summers ago, and there was nothing like my own produce.
Yeah.
Nothing. But let me give you one more example. You were making my mouth water again when you were talking about the internationalizing of food. Many years ago, when I was at the Aran Islands off the coast of Ireland, I had a fish stew that I have been unable to replicate ever since. And the reason for that is that the fish was caught that morning. The dairy products, the cream and the butter that was used, came from the farm that was behind the restaurant. The herbs came from the window boxes in front of the restaurant. To this day, I haven't been able to replicate that fish stew.
Oh, gosh.
I've tried.
Yes.
Many have come to my house and they swear by it and they say it's delicious. But we're going to go to another clip, and it's about umami itself, I think. It is.
People who research a taste called umami, which is the 5th thing that we can tell with our tongues other than sweet, sour, and all that, have said that the mushroom embodies umami and helps people who want to steer themselves towards a vegetarian diet to really stay with it, because it's really tasty like meat and it's very satisfying.
Now you speak about taste and the 5 different senses that we have, or the 5 different tastes that we have. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, the different tastes that we can experience, they all reduce to sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, which is Japanese for delicious, for really, really yummy. And umami is a late discovery. Meat has it. Mushrooms have it. There are a lot of very complex vegetable tastes that have it. There's a beautiful Japanese broth that is purely vegetarian that epitomizes umami. That's what keeps us eating. That's what makes us think, oh, this is good, I don't want to stop. So if you have an element of umami in your diet on purpose, you'll really feel you've eaten well. You don't have to eat much. You'll feel you've done a great job, and you'll be cued to put the rest of it away.
You know, I'm learning. I am learning. I'm learning about umami, and I'm learning about our chat from Sunday night. I said, I got to start reading about this stuff. You did bring some books for us.
Yes.
Brought a few, but you know, we are running down. I don't know where the hour is gone here.
I don't either.
But we're running down. We're going to talk a little bit about the locavore movement. And locavore You had a beautiful way of explaining it to me the other night, so why don't you take it away? We touched on it a little bit about growing your own and shopping locally, but you take it.
Sometimes it's called the 100-mile diet. Sometimes it's even called the 1-mile diet. That's for people who do have extensive gardens. But a locavore diet means that you've made the commitment to eat from your region and in season. Now, this is really not hard to do, and it will save you a lot of money if you do it. There are so many motivations. The wonderful sense of connection you feel with nature and with the seasons, and the fact that you've accepted the fruits of the earth that are there now for you. You haven't sent to Australia for them. That's a fantastic thing. It is a big movement. The word was only coined about, I think in 2007, it came into usage. It is a movement. It's a movement that will help to correct many of the things that are wrong with our present food systems and with big agriculture. You know, big agriculture is not necessarily your friend. The farmer nearest you is your friend, and that's who you should be paying.
So another question I have for you on the locavore movement. We see all of our farmers' movements. We see our supermarket chains starting to buy from local farms. They're not trucking it in. They're not bringing it in from overseas. How easy is it going to be moving forward to get the American culture to change their mind about what they put into their body?
I think it'll happen gradually. Do you remember the replicator on Star Trek?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're at a crossroads right now. In the future, it's either going to be food or it's going to be the replicator on Star Trek. And you can make up your mind today which you choose, and that will guide your every motion. It will frighten you to death that you can just call up a potato casserole out of nowhere and it'll be made in deep space for you. I mean, what is all that stuff? This is, if you eat real food, you're going to be much, much better off.
Elisha, for somebody like me who has to cook for themselves, I kind of like that idea of just snapping the finger and it's there.
The labor that goes into cooking, if you can lose that, it's very appealing. But one way to make cooking less laborious for yourself is just like the fish stew you were talking about, few ingredients but perfect. And that way it's, you know, you haven't spent all your money and all your time and all your energy and all your hope trying to doctor up things that came from far away and are second best to start with.
Let's go to one more clip.
But you know, we are between seasons, and the available fruit will be much more bountiful in a few weeks. What we might want to think about is, are you a locavore? Now, a locavore is a shopper who shops from local farms in season. So a lot of the things you're going to buy, like papayas in Massachusetts, are not local produce. They come from very far away. We have a very short growth season in Massachusetts. But the vegetables of the winter, kale, broccoli, any root vegetable, cabbage, and there's so many wonderful cabbages, those are local.
I'm a locavore, you're a locavore.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you so much for joining us here
It's
on
been
Dead Air
wonderful to be here.
Live.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming to Somerville.
I'm thrilled. I don't know it well.
You have a website.
I do, lucysmomcuisine.com.
There you go. I want to thank again my guest, Elisha Harris, for joining me here on Dead Air Live. I want to thank the crew, and I want to thank SCATV. Good night, everybody.